Next up, we have another company from Western Australia, Ausgold Limited. Ausgold is run by the Managing Director, Matt Greentree, and they have the Katanning project over in WA, which has had a big resource upgrade. Matt, welcome to the Virtual Gold Conference. Over to you.
Thanks, Gary. Ausgold's a primarily gold-focused explorer in the southwest Yilgarn. So that's the area just on the southwestern side of Western Australia. The project's about 350 km south of Perth. So it's pretty close to town, and it's really well supported by infrastructure because of that. So it's a wheat belt project. We've heard a lot of interest about the wheat belt in Western Australia with big discoveries such as Julimar just to our north. So Ausgold's been working in the southwest for a number of years. We've got a large ground holding of over 4,000 square kilometres, which we think is really prospective, not only for gold, but for other commodities such as nickel and PGE. So we're broadening our net as well as our focus on the gold resource down there. What we find here is, we're really well supported by infrastructure. As I said, we've got the town of Katanning, which is about 30 kilometres away. So that's about 3,000 population. It's really supportive community. Got sealed roads, access to grid power, that sort of thing really makes operating and developing a project much easier. The project itself sits on granted mining licenses. So all our resource areas are on mining licenses, which is a really important distinction of a lot of companies. We're already advanced in terms of that permitting side. So what we've been at over the last couple of years, we've been really working through the geology and working through this resource. So there's been a lot of technical work looking at the geology, understanding the distribution of gold in this deposit. And we've just completed a 40,000 metre drill program, which has resulted in a massive increase in our resource of 28%, up to 1.54 million ounces. So it's a big project now. While we did that, we also increased the grade. So the current grade's 1.25 grams per tonne, and we did that at a really low cost per ounce at $15 per resource ounce. So we're really proud of what we've achieved, but we haven't stopped there. We're continuing on, and we're continuing drilling the project to further expand it. So there's a couple of areas that we're looking at, I think will deliver larger scale. We already know that this has got the scale to be a significant gold producer. We're targeting at least 100,000 ounce production per annum over a reasonable life of mine. So this is getting really quite exciting as a gold project in Western Australia can be. We've seen some great results from this. Some of our recent drill results include 28 metres at 11.3 grams per tonne, 20 at 10. So this is, although it's a 1.25 gram ore body, there's some very high grade components to this as well. So that's a lot of our geology's gone into refining, targeting those parts and building that into our geological model. So we think there's scope for some really exciting developments in the project over the coming months and years.
Matt, if I could just interrupt you for a moment. You said earlier that you've increased the resource up 28%, which is quite substantial. Sure. Is this near surface? Is it quite deep? If you could just explain the sort of the...
Yeah, sure. It's really all open cut resource at the moment. We did announce in this recent resource update a small underground component of 50,000 ounces. That's really just a proof of concept, and we haven't done a lot of deep drilling in this project. Most of the drilling's really targeted the top 150 metres or so. So it's quite a shallow open pit type operation, but there is that scope to go deeper, chase it underground, and particularly when you start looking at some of those high grade components, that really fills into an underground quite nicely.
Have those high grade results that you've got, which a couple of them that you mentioned just now, have they surprised you to the upside?
I wouldn't say surprised, but pleased us immensely to see results like that. And I think one of the things that we've employed over the last drilling campaign is we've developed a technique using downhole EM. Now, some of our peers have used that, such as Bellevue, very successfully. And we've been employing that on this deposit as well. So we've been able to directly target these high-grade zones using that technology. And I think that's really improved our success rate and delivers fairly low-cost return when we're drilling.
We talked about Katanning, which is only a section of the land. I think you said 4,000 square kilometres, which is massive. And this is along quite a a strong mineralized area. Is the focus going to continue to be Katanning for the moment until you get the mine started, or will you be exploring in other areas as well? I kind of wanting to get a feel for what investors can expect from a news flow point of view.
Cool. So just to answer the first question is the resource area is actually focused over 4 kilometres, but we've identified a much larger trend over 17 kilometres. So that current resource area is actually the mineralisation is fairly concentrated in that area. What we're doing at the moment is looking along that 17 kilometre trend to the south, which we call the southern zone. We're quite imaginative with our naming. And what we've been doing there is seeing if we can repeat those results we've seen in the central zone and see if we can find another 1 million ounces in that southern area.
Oh, wow.
It's a direct repeat of what we know in that central zone. And I've sort of given the game away because there's also a northern zone that we haven't talked about just yet, but that forms that full 17 kilometres of strike length. We've been seeing some really promising results already from the southern zone, including 10 metres at 2.89 grams per tonne, 6 metres at 4.5 grams per tonne. So in terms of news flow, what we expect to see is some really focused drilling in this area. There's the portion that we have had limited access in the past called the Rifle Range. So we did our first reconnaissance drilling in there over the last couple of months, and we got some interesting results. We showed that the small resource in there has got potential to become much larger and fill into that Rifle Range area. But also we're going to start looking to the south there. There's a zone which we call Lucan. There's a prospect down there. It forms over a 4 kilometre strike length. It has real potential to really start to become a resource in its own right.
Wow.
And then we're starting to talk about a multi-million ounce gold project. So that's where a lot of our excitement's coming from initially in this gold project. We know this is going to be a gold mine. It's just really looking at how big this could be.
When do you make that decision? Because you say we know this is going to be a gold mine. You've got over 1 million ounces in that resource at the moment. Do you continue to grow that? What's your time frame? Because of course, once you start to produce, there's some cash flow, and that's always good for investors.
Oh, absolutely. So what we've started to do is the early parts of a pre-feasibility study. We haven't formally gone into that study yet, but what we've started to do is the geotechnical and metallurgical test work. We're about to start diamond drilling to support that test work in the next week or so. That's obviously those building blocks to convert from a resource to a reserve, which becomes a mine. And that's what we expect to see. That progress will accelerate through 2022.
Matt, do you think the community or the investors have really understood what it is that you've got out there at Katanning? Because it seems to me that you've flown a little bit under the radar. You've done a lot of what I call foundation work around the project at the moment. You've grown it to over 1 million ounces, which is great. But you're also saying that there's other projects that you're going to be looking at as well. So it seems to me that you've done lots of work, but maybe the investment community hasn't quite recognized how big this resource is and where you're going with it.
Yeah, look, with the Katanning Gold Project, it's taken a little bit of time to work out the geology in the region. This is, by all definitions, of frontier in terms of exploration geology. No one's really looked hard at the southwest Yilgarn. That's changed dramatically over the last few months, really, with the discovery of Julimar. That's really increased the focus on the southwest Yilgarn.
And hang on a second, but sorry to interrupt you, Matt, but for those of you that don't know what Julimar is, because I know that there's some of you on that are listening today that go, huh, what's Julimar? Julimar was a PGE discovery made by Chalice, who were at our conference, our gold conference, in the days when we could meet face to face, Matt, back in 2019, all those months, years ago. And they actually made this PGE discovery. It's called Julimar by Chalice. And we all know well, if you don't know, their share price went a little bit crazy, didn't it, Matt? So
it's crazy in a good way. Yeah, it's crazy definitely crazy in a good way. And I think any managing director will be pleased with that outcome.
So what are you saying? Have you got a lookalike deposit? Like what have you got down in the, is it
Look,
to the south?
I'll back up and just explain what I'm talking about there.
Yep.
We're in the same part of the Western Yilgarn as Julimar, as Boddington, some of these large, really exciting projects. But I guess what you were saying earlier is we've been flying under the radar because we've been working in what's primarily a farming district. So I guess the connection between mining and farming, there's probably, you know, in perception terms, there is a disconnect there. But the success of Chalice is to really demonstrate that there's some real elephants in this part of the world. And I think the work that's been done here in the past is so limited that those opportunities are out there. And I think we've got our foot on one already in terms of our gold project. What's also exciting is we've been able to acquire an area to the west of our gold project called Hoodanilling. It's centered around a known vanadium deposit called Red Hill. And that's just been shown to be effectively an equivalent age to Julimar. So the same age rocks that we're looking at, similar character. It's early stage out there, but we've already put in some drilling and then had some encouraging results. We've put in a reconnaissance hole and got 1.5% copper, sorry. So there is mineralization in this area. So that's, I guess, a side project, an early stage, but I think it shows that within our portfolio of projects, there's some real excitement to be had. And I think there's some opportunities for investors to really profit from that.
I think it's, and that's a very good point you make, but I think it's also important that investors understand that this is also a whole of belt exploration and Katanning is part of it, but you're also surrounded by some pretty big names in the area as well, aren't you?
Absolutely. Just to the north of us, we've seen that Anglo American has taken up a position of 10,000 square kilometres. They had to do better than us. And they're pegged all the way from our northern tenement boundary all the way through to Julimar. So they've obviously seen the opportunity as we have in this belt. Anglo American will primarily be focused on the nickel and PGE potential, but being the sort of corporate strategy there. Around us, you know, there's also, we've seen DevEx, which is another part of that Chalice stable, Peg Ground, and to the southwest of us, there's a joint venture with Ventrex and Chalice Mine. So there's obviously a recognition of the prospectivity of this region.
Matt, how did you get your foot on the ground in this area? Have you been there for a while? Because obviously with the Chalice and Julimar, but were you first mover advantage?
Absolutely. So we moved in early on. We identified the Katanning Gold Project, which is at the time was a very small gold resource of 240,000 ounces. So we've grown it a long way since those days. But we recognised that the structure and the geology there was conducive for a larger deposit. So we've put our foot on that large ground holding. We've also recently picked up areas such as that Red Hill Hoodanilling area with a focus on those laid mafic, ultramafic intrusives out there, which to decode is very similar to what you'd expect to see hosting a Julimar style PGE deposit.
Earlier in our conversation, you spoke about the fact that there's the town of Katanning, which is 3,000 people. So I guess workforce is easy to get out there. Right now, for those of you that don't know, the mining industry is in a bit of a boom and sometimes it's hard to find the right people. Have you got enough geologists? Have you the rigs? In other words, are there any, I guess, impediments to you continuing to grow this resource towards building and eventually into a mine?
No, we've been really successful putting in a strong technical team. So we've got 4 full-time geologists working for us at the moment, a really good field team there that's really versed in the project. They understand how to operate in this area. Being on freehold land, we just have to know how to interact with the local communities because we're really face to face with them all the time. We try to employ locals where possible to really bolster that as well, just that connection with the community. And I think going forward, using our relationship with various service providers, drilling companies that we've been working with for the good times and the bad, we've been able to really continue on sort of unimpeded. If we're coming new to the game, there's a lot of demands on the industry, as you alluded to, and it's not easy to get equipment. We've had some headaches. That said, everyone's found assay turnaround times terrible in the last year. And that's really just an outcome of COVID, outcome of supply shocks in terms of people in Western Australia. It's a bit of a golden cage. It's once you're in here, it's fine, but it's hard to get in and out. So we're really...
we know, Matt, we can't get into you. That's why we're doing it via Zoom.
But that's, in terms of operating, we've got a good local workforce. Being close to Perth is a real advantage. Yeah. We don't have to rely on flying people in and out and things like that. So it's really logistically a very straightforward operation.
Again, just from a visual point of view for those that are watching and listening, when you say close to Perth, how far away are you? How do you get to site?
It's a 3.5 hour drive on Sealed Road all the way. So it's a
easy.
There and back in the day if you need to.
All right. So what's next? Continue to drill and continue to increase the resource. I just want to get a flavour for what the news flow will be for the rest of 2021.
Yeah. So working on farmland, our main field season really starts to open up in November. We're drilling we're about to start drilling with diamond in the next week. So that will, start building up our news flow on that side. We'll really go hard at it during that summer period, and we expect to see some real advances, particularly in that southern zone where I was suggesting that we've got another 1 million ounces. That's our focus going forward, is to really see if we can expand the project beyond the scale we have now. And the view would be going into the next year is to put the studies to support a mine development down there.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about a pre-feasibility study. When do you think that you might start on that?
We'll start looking at that in the new year. We're already started doing some of those building blocks and the foundations for that.
And that, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that don't know what a PFS is, it's really just to see whether this is an economic deposit and how you can bring it further towards becoming a mine. Am I right, Matt? You probably could explain it a lot better than I do.
Yeah, that's probably it in a nutshell. We've already shown that it's an economic project with a scoping study, but what we're looking at is a much larger project than we considered in that.
All right. Well, it would be remiss of me. Everybody knows I always do this, Matt. Why is now a good time for our investor audience that are listening to you today? Over 1 million ounces, growing rapidly. But why invest in Ausgold today?
We've got a large scale gold resource already. This is going to be a mine. We're already doing the foundation work to show that. Beyond that, we've been a first mover in this region that's only just become fashionable. So we're really just getting started and looking at that larger ground position. We've got a number of targets, and they'll see drilling in the summer period that in areas they've never seen drilling before. So there's some real excitement coming into the story with that. And then on the other side of that, we're not just looking at gold. Chalice's discovery has really, I guess, opened up the potential of the southwest Yilgarn. The Geological Survey in Western Australia has just done a really sizable report on this southwest terrain, and they've shown that the rocks that we have at Red Hill are equivalent in age, at least, to the Julimar deposit. So there's some real opportunities here that we will have some success in that front as well.
Potential discovery success, lots of groundwork being done, over 1 million ounces in gold. Matt Greentree, Managing Director of Ausgold, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us on the Virtual Gold Conference. And ladies and gentlemen, if you've forgotten, the ASX code is AUC. Check them out now. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.